were the best episodes of a deeper dive in 2023? Hello, this is Jonathan Mays, Editor-in-Chief of Restaurant Business. And in this very special episode of a deeper dive, I'm joined by nobody. Instead, we decided to take a look at some of the more interesting podcast episodes of the year. We've spoken with a lot of people about a lot of topics over the course of 2023, and the podcast featured some amazing guests. But here's a look at some of the more intriguing ones. We talked about marketing. We spoke with some of the country's biggest growth concepts. We talked delivery, inflation, and, of course, tipping. To start with, let's go back to September when we talked with marketing expert Chip Klose. Chip noted that oftentimes small restaurant companies let marketing fall by the wayside with everything else they have to do. And he talks about how those restaurant companies can pick it up again. You know, I would suspect, I might be wrong, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but most people in the restaurant business do not go into the restaurant business because they are good at marketing or want to do marketing. They mostly just like food, like cooking it, and like serving it to people, and enjoy the industry and want to do that. So talk a little bit about how, if I'm, I have my, 2-unit concept, I just opened my second unit.
Yep.
How do I get into the mindset of marketing my business?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll go back and say there's a lot of different hats that restaurant owners have to wear, especially independent owners and operators. They've got to be HR, they've got to be accounting, they got to be accounts payable, they've got to be marketing. So this is not foreign to them. I think most restaurant owners sort of learn a lot about, or learn a little about a lot of different departments. And unfortunately, I think marketing sort of falls by the wayside, right? You do this in the book, I talk about it, this field of dreams effect, right? If you build it, they will come. Well, not necessarily, especially not now, because our markets are so saturated. Even if you live in a smaller rural area, there's still a lot of great places. So no matter what market you're in, there's a lot of great choices, and people go to the places they know, like, and trust. So when we talk about marketing, I think one of the things that that most owners just skip right over is this foundational piece, right? I always ask people about their marketing, and they give me one of two answers. Number one, they start telling me about how many times they post to social media each week. Or number two, they say, well, we don't really do marketing. We're not we're not McDonald's. We're not Outback. We can't afford to do marketing. And neither of those are right? If you sell things to other human beings, you have to market. You have to figure out who would like what you have, right? So to answer your question, how do you get started with marketing? You've got these 2 units. I think you do this foundational work, and it's sort of like the beginning of the book. It's something that I've talked about with my clients. I've talked about on the podcast for a long time. It's this framework that I've developed called the ABCDs of Marketing, right? ABCD stands for audience, brand, competition, and differentiation. And really, it's a way to get owners and operators to think about who their audience is, right? Like who their product is for. I always say there's 2 ways to market, right? Either you come up with a product and then go try to find customers, which PS is how we spend most of our time. And then the opposite, which is the best companies in the world, do it in reverse. They look out to the market, they look for a group of people who need something, and then they just fill that need. And I think we can all be much more successful as an industry if we work in reverse order. Instead of just building the thing we want to build and then go try to talk people into it, go out and figure out what people want and then build that. And so that's the foundational work. That's the heart of marketing, which is to find a market, meaning find people who need to be served. Then create a solution to their problem, right? Solve a problem that you're uniquely qualified to solve. Competition, right? It's about figuring out who's trying to solve the same problem you are. And differentiation is really this idea of how do you position yourself in the market. Let's assume if you're entering the market that there are other options in the market, right? You will not be the only restaurant. You will not be the only sushi restaurant. You will not be the only steakhouse. So if you come to market, you need to convince people why they should come to your restaurant as opposed to the one they already know, right? So we're going to open a steakhouse in town, but why should I come to your steakhouse as opposed to the one down the street that I've been going to for the last 10 years? All restaurant owners, whether we realize it or not, have to supply an answer to that. And this is the foundational work that I think most independent operators skip right over, and they start talking about social media or their website or how many times they email their list or on. And all those things are important. but you can't begin to do that until you have this foundational work. So that's where I would begin. Understand how you fit in the market, how you, what problem you solve, and how you solve it better than anyone else that's available. Meaning, why should people come to you as opposed to any of the options out there?
Yeah. So, but you think that it's smart to think about marketing before you even open the restaurant?
That's a great question, right? I mean, do you come up with a concept and then go try and find a space for the concept? Or do you find a great space and then say, well, what does this neighborhood need? There's no right or wrong answer. I think too many people do the former. I got a great idea for a concept and they just go look at spaces that would be perfect for that concept. And I'm guessing, I would bet, because I've seen this happen enough, they pass over some really great spots that could easily house a different kind of concept because they got blinders on. And I wish we just took those blinders off a little bit. Not saying one way is better than the other, but I think working those in tandem, you can come up with a concept and then go try and find a space. But when you find a really great space where the rent is good, the traffic is good, all of that, you got to be willing, able to stop and say, well, wait a minute. So the original concept, that wouldn't work here. But let's figure out something that would work here because, man, this thing just fell in our lap. I think that's what we need to get better of doing. And we're sort of seeing that proven out over the last couple of years.
So how, talk about the strategies that companies can use, small businesses can use to leverage social media effectively.
Isn't it? It's so sweet and sticky, right? We can't not talk about social media. It's one of the last things that I ever talk about because I just don't think it's that important. Now,
really,
I do think it's important.
Nice.
I do think it's important. It's just not more important than a lot of other things. That a lot of times, here's a perfect example, right? We spend all our time saying, I need butts and seats. I need butts and seats. Okay. Social media is the way to get that. On average, an organic post is seen by about 3% of your followers. So if you've got 1,000 followers, people following your profile on Instagram, only about 30 of them are seeing it. And there's no guarantee that they're even in your market. They could be anywhere around the world. So while I think it's great to have a lot of followers, you don't know if these are followers who could be customers. And I think this is one of the real disservices we've done to ourselves. We thought, oh, I got all these followers. They could eventually become customers. We don't know that. Geography plays a big role. Maybe people follow because they don't have the money to go to these restaurants, right? Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of followers follow places like Alinea or Jean-Georges or Noma. They will never go to Noma because they can't get to Copenhagen and they can't afford to dine at Copenhagen, but they sort of appease that by following them and seeing what Rene Redzepi is doing. So when we talk about social media, we got to be really clear with what it is. Social media is not a social platform. They're not places for us to go and connect with people. That was sort of the great lie that was told. It is simply what's next. It is where the eyeballs are, where attention is. The attention was on newspapers. The attention was on radio. The attention was on TV. Now the attention is on our computer screens. And social media is very addictive. We know that. And that's where eyeballs are. So what people like Mark Zuckerberg have done, in a good way, is created the most sophisticated advertising platform ever created. Now, when I say that, I'll also say that 95% of all independent restaurants in this country are not leveraging the most powerful asset that tool, right? Meta, let's talk about Facebook and Instagram. They're not leveraging the most valuable piece of that platform, which is the ability to target with great specificity the people that you want to target. So when we talk about social media, you tell me, oh, I post 4 times on Instagram. They're talking about organic posting. They're saying they take a picture, they post it, they add a caption, and they hope a lot of people see it. And a lot of people get hungry by seeing the burger. And that's a hope and pray, spray and pray. There's no strategy to that. There's no goal attached to that. So the best way we should be using social media is as a 1-2 punch. Now, I said I don't think it's that important, but it is important. It deserves its place. Mm-hmm. I believe the social media sites are about maintaining a presence. There's certainly a value to SEO, which is this very technical part of digital marketing, right? Search engine optimization. It's important that you have a presence there, that it's alive, that it's always being updated and refreshed and you're engaging. I believe that's true. But if we're it's like trying to use a screwdriver to hammer in the nail. That's good for maintaining presence and for SEO and for traffic and all of that. Let's make sure that we're using it to accomplish the goal we need to accomplish. But if we're trying to reach new people, to raise awareness, we're using it for customer acquisition, then we're using the hammer to screw in the screw. We have to use the paid advertising tools. And you don't have to spend $10,000 a month to see a result. $5 a day, $10 a day. I always talk to my clients about $15 a day, basically, right? So that's about $450 a month. For under $500 a month, you can actually put together a pretty good strategy. And when you see it work, all you do is raise the budget there. We have to use those tools to try to raise awareness, to try to expand our reach, to try to drive specific actions. And that's the other thing. Whenever we're talking about marketing, we got to stop talking about all the stuff we do. And I think we have to start talking about the things we're trying to achieve.
In this next clip, we go back to early January when I spoke with Bill Phelps, the CEO of Dave's Hot Chicken, and co-founder Armin Oganessian. Armin, in this clip, tells the fantastic story of how what is now the hottest restaurant chain on the planet got its start. Tell me the story of Dave's Hot. Tell us all the story about Dave's Hot Chicken.
So Dave's Hot Chicken was a concept that we started back in 2017. Before Dave's, I was doing a little bit of stand-up comedy, a little bit of entertainment here and there. And I was friends with Dave Kapushin, who was a culinary chef. And then we kind of saw that chicken was really starting to trend in Los Angeles, and it was one of our favorite foods. So we thought to ourselves, well, why don't we take, kind of the entertainment and marketing, background that we have, or I have, and take the culinary experience that Dave has and try to create a concept out of it, So we linked up and we worked on the recipe at Dave's house for months. And our other friend, Tommy, joined us. So it was the three of us. And it took us maybe 4 to 5 months to kind of perfect our recipe. And we worked out of Dave's house. And when it came down to actually starting the concept, we obviously realized that we didn't have any money. Dave was a struggling chef. I was obviously a stand-up comedian, which means I was unemployed at the time. And Tommy didn't have much money either. So we kind of scrapped together what little we had. I think Dave took his last check. I had a life savings of like $300. And Tommy invested a little bit. So we took that $900 and we got a couple tables. We got some fryers and some food. And then we just posted on social media, which was our only form of marketing. And we literally just opened up the next day. We were ready. We made $40 our first day at the pop-up, which, I mean, to us, it was still amazing because we're like, well, at least it's working a little bit. We got, 4 people to buy it. And then we kind of really started to strategize. We kind of understood that we can use social media to our advantage. At the time, we were a big fan of Farley Elliott, who was a writer for Eater LA. So we kind of figured that if we can get them to notice us and get them to come down to the pop-up and try the food, it could be really good for the brand. So we kind of did a big social media focus on, tagging him and tagging Eater LA and really trying to get his attention, which really worked because he dropped by the pop-up, I think, 4 or 5 days after we opened up. He had the food and wrote a crazy article about us the next day. And the rest is kind of history. I mean, we came to the store the next day. There was 90 people waiting in line where our average was maybe 10 to 15 people a day before that. And did the same thing, kind of realized that we had something big, saved up as much money as we could, brought in Tommy's older brother as kind of an investor with us to help us with the first store. Opened up Western on January 1st, 2018, so 6 months after the pop-up. I think we worked that store for about nine months before we met Bill and John. And I mean, we loved them from the beginning. The experience they had and how much love they had for the brand and us as founders was great to us. So, partnered up with them. And here we are 4 years later with 100 stores and 600 more in the pipeline.
Wow. All right. So now that pop-up was in wasn't it a parking lot?
It was a parking lot. We had one space in the parking lot.
One space in a parking lot. Did the owner of the parking lot know you were there?
Yeah. So the owner of the parking lot knew Tommy because Tommy had worked at one of his businesses before. And Tommy told him that we wanted to do a pop-up. And he initially thought it was like a hot dog stand. So he gave us one parking spot and he didn't see the pop-up till 2 months into it. And when he came 2 months later to the parking lot, there was like 80 people waiting for food. And there was like all this stuff. And he's like, dude, this is a whole restaurant you guys have over here. So this is not a pop-up. So eventually we realized probably getting a little too big for a single parking lot space. And that's when we really started to focus on expanding to a storefront.
Now I'm looking at the picture because I got a picture of this pop-up. And it's really a makeshift. I mean, this is as makeshift a restaurant as if that's a full-on restaurant. That's my porch is a makeshift restaurant. So
there you go, dude. I mean,
like it's I mean, you've got like a couple of folding tables, at least 3 that I could see. There's probably, you got a canopy you probably bought from Walmart or Target or something like that.
Yep.
And like the one cooking thing is it's just one cooking implement. It's just, this thing is kind of incredible. How did you, I mean, you were serving how many people a night with this setup?
We served up to 100 people a night with that setup. Before we upgraded, the only thing we upgraded was the fry to a little bit of a bigger fryer. And then when we had a bigger fryer, we were able to serve up to 300 people. And we were serving them. So we'd open our pop-up at 7 p.m. and we'd already have a line of like maybe 50, 60 people. We'd sell out of food by 8:30 and we'd just spend the rest of the night cooking the food. So we would actually sell out of 300 orders between 7 and 8:30. So within an hour and a half, we got 300 orders and then just cooked it for the rest of the night.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so it must have felt pretty good to actually get a roof over your head.
Yeah. I mean, we were telling Bill that initially when we started the pop-up, our goal was to work the pop-up for a year, use the money to get a food truck, work that for a year, and then use the money from that to get a location. So we had a 3-year plan to get to our brick and mortar, and which we got to it in 5 months. And 3 years later, we were already at like 30, 40 locations. So we way exceeded our expectations of what we thought we could do.
I don't know how many restaurants Dave's has opened since I recorded that episode, but it was undoubtedly a lot. Now, it would not be an end-of-the-year clip show without a clip featuring regular guest Jim Balis of CapitalSpring. In this clip, I talk with Jim about the state of the economy and what is happening with the consumer, and he talks about a slip in delivery sales at a certain segment. Unless really the economy really sort of takes a tumble in some form or fashion, which I suppose eventually it does. But even that, I mean, from an economic perspective, I mean, we haven't really seen a ton of evidence at the moment yet that the consumer is going to drastically cut back spending, which everybody's been predicting now for about a year and a half. It just hasn't. It's just not really happening, and we don't really see any evidence in restaurants. Not really.
Yeah, I mean, there's one small exception, I would say, and that's delivery. We are seeing specifically in full serve a pullback on the massive delivery that we saw, during and post COVID, where people sort of got in the habit of ordering now. And I think it may have been when gas prices spiked. I think people became a little bit more amenable to I'm just going to go pick it up, ordering, so takeout is holding or actually going up. And, it's interesting in a lot of the full serve restaurants where it may have been 5% years ago, is now in the 15-20% range, which adds another expense factor for us, which is packaging, especially in full serve where there's a number of sides and, packaging can be a significant cost associated with that. But, we are seeing a little bit of a pullback in delivery. And then the metric that a lot of people don't talk about is transactions and traffic. And while sales seem to be holding a lot of it from price, we are seeing transactions, not be as positive as sales. And a lot of the sales may have been driven by some of the price that was taken.
Yeah. So people are cutting back, but because of price, it appears that they're not necessarily doing so.
Yeah.
On the delivery question, do you think that the delivery cutback is because people are themselves kind of cutting back because delivery is an expensive transaction, or do you think it's just because consumers are normalizing, or do you think it's a bit of both?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit of both. I mean, I'm sure, you've experienced it with your kids. Me too. I mean, you order something and, it's a bit of a sticker shock by the time you see the total at the bottom, excluding the 99-cent over $10 toast charge that is going to be added to most bills here now, but which is extremely well hidden in the last transaction that I processed. But, I think, there's a bit of sticker shock when you order something now delivered and, the restaurants are taking price to offset the commissions. The commissions are massive because a lot of delivery companies are, losing money or barely making money. So I just think that people look at it and say, I'm sitting at home, I'll just go pick it up. It's easier, and it's less expensive, and I have the same experience, and I think people are coming back for that reason.
Yeah. Jim, I am a cheap bastard and a control freak. I really do not order delivery all that much unless I am doing it for some work related reason. I just go get the food myself. I can't. But I mean, when I have, we've done a number of examinations of delivery costs versus picking up yourself. And to me, it just makes zero financial sense to do that. And with costs going up the way they are, to me, it always just seems that from a budget standpoint, delivery is something that you absolutely can cut back on. And we hear that from Domino's. And if you look at pizza, for instance, Domino's and Papa John's as well, you see their numbers, and their delivery numbers are down, and frozen pizza sales has taken off. Walmart sells their frozen pizza sales jumped 30% in the first quarter, which is insane. And pizza is kind of really one of the easiest things that you can shift from grocery to restaurants and the other way around. And it seems that that's probably probably one of the better indications that we have of some sort of consumer cutback for sure, because they still like pizza, which is good, but they're not getting delivered.
I agree with you. What's interesting about, the pizza delivery segment is they've struggled on drivers. So, the times that had typically been 30 minutes escalated to 60 minutes. And, you have kids at home screaming, they want to eat, that becomes a big factor in choosing between delivery. And the next time you're at the supermarket, you're saying, I'm just going to throw this in the freezer so I don't have to wait 60 minutes or, whatever the time period may be. And then also, if you've ordered from some of the major pizza players, when you get the product delivered, it's a little bit of a sticker shock as well. You don't see a lot of the price points that you see advertised on TV. And I think, there's a big push and, for some of the pizza players to move into the carryout space, which had really been owned and probably still is to a large degree by Little Caesars, which is, a QSR pizza operator. And, you see Domino's pushing heavily into that takeout, category because they're trying to capture some of that market share. And I think, they are able to execute at a much lower price point, which is a lot more attractive to their consumers. I think you'll see some of the other players do the same, really push takeout, knowing that A, they're having trouble with drivers, and B, they can really push value promotions from a takeout perspective because they don't bear the same expenses as they do on delivery.
Yeah. Plus, carryout is just more profitable for the operator. You don't have, especially if they're ordering by app, which they should. Frankly, nobody should call a pizza restaurant. I'm sorry, if anybody listening is stop calling the pizza restaurant.
Yeah, stop calling. It's not good for us either. We can't answer the phone anyway. We have no labor.
No, that wasn't the only time we talked about the odd state of the U.S. consumer. Much of last year was spent fretting about the impact of high prices. In this clip, I talk with Technomic Associate Principal Lauria Rakoczy about the state of inflation, traffic, and why consumers keep spending what they do at restaurants.
Everybody unleashed pent-up demand in 2021, and then in 2022, things kind of went back down to normal, and then you had inflation and things like that. But even now, if we're looking at some of the data, in the fast food world, which I cover most extensively, is you are seeing this normalization of customers going away from ordering, from going to the drive-through all the time. They're going back inside dining rooms more. You've seen some normalization of drive-through traffic. Maybe some of it's shifting to delivery. But that's still hard to tell. I don't know. So it kind of makes things a little bit frustrating in the current market, trying to figure out, because in the old days, we would just say, well, if your traffic is down, obviously your prices are too high or consumers are cutting back. And now we can't necessarily say that with complete confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was an article a couple months ago that I wrote about, why are people cutting back? And, prices, obviously, it's really important right now, but a lot of it's just like a lifestyle issue where it's just, I'm just not going out as much or, thinking about that. I mean, it's obviously price and especially, the options we gave in the survey, COVID-19 was still pretty high, even across age groups is just a concern, and it kind of you still see those peaks and valleys, come out. And then there's just that, I think, normalization where, one of the questions we ask every month is how often are you eating out compared to, 2019? What do you think? Or just a simple one, same or more or less. And, only I think about 60% of people say they're back to where they were. So we're seeing that play out in different day parts. So that's another thing I think with traffic too, and the numbers got pretty, kind of noisy and hard to figure out as a lot of it's very, specific to day parts. We'll be, as I mentioned earlier, for recording, we're going to the food service planning program and we're going to be looking at some of the future of limited service and just how people have been opting out. And one of those ways is like cutting out just like the snack or the beverage, so looking at that. And so some of that might be clouding the data where it looks like people are going a lot, but they're actually like, well, we used to go to that. We used to treat ourselves with that afternoon snack or the coffee, and now they're not doing that. So that's cutting back a little bit.
Yeah. And I mean, we, one of the other things that we also saw like during the pandemic is that people were going out less often, but man, they were splurging when they do. And that might be part of what's going on right now. Good. You've got some data on that, don't you?
About, like the splurging where it's, our average checks are staying the same during the week, but actually they're going out maybe one time less, or, and they're still going to the fine dining, or with the Gen Z data where you don't see them saying they're cooking at home more often. They're still using food service and going to, one of the, things, another, data point too, is just about, behavior on inflation and expected inflation. And there's another, point that pops out with Gen Z that's different than all the other age groups is just a less concern overall, and it doesn't even matter about the income. I think at the beginning we were doing the studies, we do this quarterly study. It was more of a lower income was more concerned. And then it just creeped across to every level of income that's concerned about inflation. It was, I think the very concerned is more than half, like 54% or so, but then you go to Gen Z and it's like 40. So I think that's another, about being personally very concerned. So I don't know if it's just, they're not maybe as engaged in the market, various reasons they don't have, the families yet to worry about. So they weren't as concerned. So I think that's just playing into them not cutting back, where you're looking at 150,000 income plus, and they're cutting back. So it's just a different set of responsibilities, lifestyles you're maintaining, I guess, that you're still going to be going out. So I thought that was interesting in the future. I think it's like a barometer of confidence, or it could be that, kind of coming of age and going to restaurants during the pandemic, and also, kind of being hit with these, a global pandemic, that maybe they're just not as concerned about anything, because who knows? There's so many things are uncertain that, hey, maybe we should just go spend our money in restaurants.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about that generation and some of the things that they've had to endure just in a massive percentage of their lives, I mean, I have two Gen Zers. 118 and 114, and, so really in the last, the pandemic and sort of this political division that we've endured and stuff like that, really in the last few years is kind of difficult. And so, to maybe to them, inflation is just sort of comparably lesser of a concern because, they've gotten through all this other stuff. So I mean, to me, there might be something to that. But
and then, I think people just get used to the high numbers. I mean, I know we're seeing the inflation not go down, but it increase less. So it's not like prices are going to get cut, but I think that will just be ingrained that, well, this is what something costs. And if you're just, kind of aging into buying your own food and, getting out of college and, being a consumer like that, it's just, this is what it costs. So I don't think we're going to see as many things cut back, or them cut back as much as older generations have been.
Meanwhile, what may quietly be the biggest story of the year was the growth of tipping, service fees, and the impact growing federal regulation is having on all of that. In this clip, you can hear me rant about all of this, followed by a discussion with my RB colleague, Peter Romeo. Hint, I do not like U.S. tipping culture. So what we have here is a situation in which a growing number of communities are ending a tip credit, which is leading a growing number of restaurants to institute service fees, and also creating this push between restaurants, customers, and servers over tipping. And at the same time, now we've got this threat of regulation sitting over here from the federal government, over these sorts of fees. To me, like the U.S., look, I mean, the U.S., I'm just going to be very blunt and honest. I find this whole thing stupid as hell. I think our situation in the restaurant industry today, the full service restaurant industry today, is one of the dumbest situations that has evolved out of our capitalist system outside of things like healthcare. I don't think anybody in their right minds would create a system in which you have companies too afraid to raise prices to the levels that they're supposed to be doing. And that's what's going on here. That's always what has been going on since day one. Since the day the first idiot brought tipping to the United States. That is exactly my view on this. It's because employers have always been afraid of raising the price of a taco. We've had somebody else on this podcast before. I'm afraid to raise the price of a taco. And so therefore I'm not going to do it. So instead what you do is you just get them on the back end. So something to me about all of this, about the way this operates, is going to have to change and going to have to be simple. Because the problem we have now is we have created a system where the prices for eating out have gone up dramatically. And it's not just the menu prices that people are paying. It's these fees that we're getting. It's the tipping and the tip prompts. By the way, we just said, we have our advice guy column, and the advice guy column this week was from a restaurant owner who said their staff was asking them to increase the level of tip prompts because people were just automatically from 18, 20 to 23% to 20 to a baseline of 20, 23, 25%. The staff wanted them to push customers to increase the level of tips. Now, I'm all in favor of people making more money, but we're at a point where the whole thing is actually customer unfriendly and in a serious way, where the price you end up paying when you dine out is very different than the price you think you're going to pay when you go into it. And ultimately, I just think this is going to be a problem for the industry over the next couple of years, given how much this costs.
You hit the nail on the head in that this system is just so peculiar. If you were an MBA candidate and you did your thesis on developing a compensation model built on tipping, you would get an F. It's a crazy, stupid idea. It should not work. It's just irrational from the get-go, except it works.
No, it actually doesn't. I will vehemently disagree with you. I just went to a local restaurant. I'll tell you, I just went to a local restaurant, doesn't have tipping, great service. I had no problems. I've been in Europe, no tipping problems. I have never had a problem with service. Any kind of it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It doesn't look any different here than it does anywhere.
Well, so servers love it. They love it because tipping will give them more money than if they got the full minimum wage with no tip.
Sure.
So unless tipping has to be
unless they happen to be black or something else. The how much you get in tips does not necessarily correlate between
Well, that's
how
true.
good a service you provide, and it's discriminatory against certain groups.
That is true. That is true. There's definitely some problems with it.
Yeah,
Women,
huge problems with it.
but the operators like it. And the interesting thing is, where I would disagree with you is a lot of customers like to tip. When Danny Meyer did away with tipping and went with hospitality included, one of the biggest problems he had was people drawing in a line for tips. So even if it's irrational, it's what we're accustomed to. But where I agree with you is something has to change. You know, for eons, you and I have been at this a lot more than a few weeks. And the industry has been saying, boy, we wish we had a professional service class, restaurant service class, like they do in Europe. Well, we're starting to get it. Part of that is the industry has got to pay its employees more. It's criminal what some people make. And so we're in that transition period. And this is part of that transition period of shifting to actually that being a career. It might not happen before the time we retire, but it is happening. And that is part of the reason why I think the tip credit is going to go away. And we're going to see more salaried servers and things like that. Certainly, we're going to see right now in that transition, we're going to see a lot of people on the full service side shift into fast casual just to avoid some of these problems.
I mean, we're starting to see that already. I mean, Lisa Jennings just actually wrote about one situation in DC already, where you definitely see it, where we are seeing more hybrid type business models and more business models that are really sort of shifting away from from some of the full service models that we've seen in the past. I find the whole thing to be monumentally confusing. It's causing more complications than, to me, I think it's worth. And the idea, we definitely need a professional service class. I don't think that there's any question about that at all.
I gave a presentation last week to non-commercial operators about labor and what's working, what incentives seem to be turning heads in terms of recruitment. And really, all the things that I listed based on what we've been writing about were all steps toward a career. Things like educational development, things like addressing familial needs, not only educating the employee, but their spouse or another member of their family, or some type of educational assistance for their children, housing assistance. That's the new frontier. We're going to see a lot of that going forward. And it's all part of this. I'm no longer a kid looking for pocket money so I can buy beer and a car. I might be the head of the household, and I'm looking for a way to sustain my family. And so the industry is getting what it wanted, but it's going to have to pay. I mean, really, when you look at fast food prices, even given the last 2 years, they are still a bargain. And you go back to when I was a kid, when I remember going to Wetson's, where it was 15 cents for a burger and a quarter for a double, where for 50 cents you could get a meal. It's astronomical. It's almost like it's defying physics to do that. So the industry, we have a long way to go for sure.
Yeah, 15 cents, you're old, Peter.
Well, it was wonderful. And I mean, this was at a time when a McDonald's burger might have been 45 cents, but at Wetson's, a local chain, you could get a double burger for 25 cents. Fries were 10 cents and a drink was 30 cents. And so you could go there as much as you wanted. So, and not that long ago, despite what you might think.
All right. For the record, I tip really well, just for the record. And that should do it for this year's episodes of A Deeper Dive. But before I go, I would like to thank all of you for listening to the podcast this year. You are what makes me continue to do this week after week, and I definitely appreciate it. A Deeper Dive was edited by Spoons. Artwork by Nico Hines. You may find this and other episodes of the podcast on our website at www.restaurantbusinessonline.com/article/deeper-dive. And you may subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I am Jonathan Mays, your host, podcast producer, and the editor-in-chief of Restaurant Business. Thank you for listening.